Hi guys, welcome to Coffee Table Comics. So you might have been noticing that I've been pulling all my old Making Comics episodes over to YouTube, because you might have also known that I started this website called Making Comics, and it was a podcast. I had a lot of articles, and then in like 2013, I gave it to Patrick Urick, who has taken over and turned it into Making Comics Worldwide, a big website for comic education. And they took over the podcast too. But I still have all these old episodes, and I wanted to put them out there and just allow everyone to hear them. So I've been putting those on YouTube, and I'll keep putting those all on YouTube. But this year, 2016, I actually started recording new episodes, and they're called Coffee Table Comics Podcast. So I want to play the first one for you right now. It's all an audio interview. I will put a whole pile of artwork from these guys that I'm talking to into the YouTube videos. So this first episode is with Royden Lepp. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's published through Archaea, and he does this book series called Rust. It's amazing looking. I'll show you a bunch of flip-throughs of the book that I have here. The other guy in this roundtable discussion is Daniel Warren Johnson. He used to listen to the original podcast that I made, and he was using that as fuel and inspiration as he was trying to get into comics. And look at him now. He's amazing. I mean, just check out his art. His comic is called Space Mullet, is his personal comic, and he's done a ton of stuff for all the major publishers pretty much now. And he's huge. He's amazing. So anyway, these guys are really cool people. I love them both. So check them both out. But before we start, please subscribe. I'm going to be posting a lot of these interviews. I have a lot of them already recorded, and I have a bunch lined up to record. So subscribe if you like this kind of thing, and I'll see you around. Enjoy the show. Cue audience. Cut. I said cut. Hello, this is Jason Brubaker. I'm the creator of Remind, and now Sithra is my full-time comic I'm working on. Just this last year, I moved out of LA, quit the industry of Hollywood, and moved to Idaho, and I've been working on comics full-time. It's been a real dream come true. So I decided to start this new podcast called Coffee Table Comics Podcast. And it's going to be a round table where I just bring in some amazingly talented artists that blow my mind, that I'm jealous of, and I just want to ask them all kinds of questions and pick their brains as to what they're learning and what they're figuring out, because this industry is crazy and it's changing every day. Anyway, let's see where this goes. The MIGs are increasing as we speak. All right, okay. I have some awesome guests that I am huge fans of. Royden Lepp, who does Rust with Archaea.
It's good to hear your voice again, Jason.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while.
Yeah. Well, we met at face-to-face at DreamWorks for coffee once, and we were going to try to do it live next time you were in town, but it never happened, and then I skipped town. So I doubt you'll ever come to Idaho. You'll never be here, so we got to do it like this.
Yeah, and I will have definitely more time, I would imagine, if I am in Idaho, so we could get together.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing podcasts again. And then the other special guest is Daniel Warren Johnson. He does Space Mullet, and I found his stuff a long time ago, and I was always fascinated with it because it just seems like it popped up out of nowhere. And I always wanted to have you on the show, but it happened after I was like, forget this podcast. I'm never doing this again. So so I figured, hey, you could be the first guest too.
I've been working with Dark Horse a lot in the past 2 years, yeah, and okay. I'm working with Image Comics as well now. I've done a little work for Marvel, a little work for DC, a little bit of everything.
Well, welcome, Daniel.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with you, Daniel. How did you? Is it true that you just kind of like put your comic online one day and then you started getting professional work?
Yes, I mean that's very short. That's like that's the short form.
Okay,
answer.
I was right. Okay, good. Maybe
yeah,
elaborate.
It was basically, yeah, I was seeing the webcomic model that was happening. or at least the webcomic model of people making, not to disparage any sort of, webcomics in general, but, when you think of the term, I think webcomic, I think it's changed over the course of the past few years, but you think of webcomic and maybe the art quality you don't think of as being super awesome, the story maybe being like a gag a day strip. Nothing inherently wrong with like those things, but I was really paying attention to the webcomics that were actively pursuing like professional quality artwork and stories that just continued on like it would be in a book.
Yeah.
And so I just decided to go for it, and I just put up 2 pages a week for about 2 years, and then I started getting some knocks on my door. So,
but wait,
yes.
I mean, you had to have been doing comics like as a passion for more than just 2 years, though, or have you always just drawn? I mean, what's the deal?
I was drawing since I was in first grade, drawing Power Rangers.
Okay.
But I guess I never really considered illustration as a serious career. And that's no fault. That's not like my parents' fault, or they always believed that I could do whatever I wanted to do. But I didn't even think it was a possibility to like draw for a living.
That's right. I remember listening to the podcast Adam did with you, and you were like working at a coffee shop, or no?
I was a hospital transporter.
Oh, and again, totally not a coffee shop.
I drank a lot of coffee, but
so you always kind of just drew, and then you just never thought it could happen. So you tried out the webcomic thing to just say, let's see if this works. And
well, I was doing transport. I did transport for 2 years, and that was after, because I got my degree in art education. So I was an art teacher in Chicago. I was training to be an art teacher in Chicago. And I just had a slew of very bad experiences teaching in Chicago, like student teaching. So I was like, I'm never going to teach again. I'm just going to find any job and do that for a while and just figure things out. And that's how I fell into moving patients around a huge hospital in Chicago. But then a teaching job fell in my lap after those 2 years, a middle school teaching job. And I thought, like, okay, third time's the charm. Maybe this was meant to happen. Like, I did virtually no work to get the job. Somebody referred me, and I was in, basically. And it was one of the toughest years of my life. It was terrible.
Okay.
It was a really bad experience. And after that, I got married in March of that teaching year. And my wife started to see like kind of the toll that teaching was taking on me. So she actually was the one who put the seed in my brain of like, oh, well, you're really good at drawing. You've always wanted to like do it more and do it professionally, but like you're never going to know unless you actually like try it. So I think I needed somebody else to say this is a possibility for me to actually try and go for the possibility.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started.
And how old were you when you first started putting that stuff online, if you don't mind me asking?
That was 2012, so I was 24, 25, 24.
25, 24?
Yeah.
Wow. To me, it's just cool. I just like hearing how people, the odd ways people break in.
I know
to me, it's all unique. Yeah.
I know everybody has such a unique journey.
Yeah.
Because we all end up as artists. We're just like, oh, I really want to do this thing. And even though there's lots of places for us as artists, everybody has to find their own way. And that's why it's so difficult to field any questions for people like, how do I break in, or how do I get to do what you're doing? And it's just like, you won't. And not like you won't, but like you won't do it the way that I did,
Yeah.
And when you do, your stuff isn't going to look like mine. It's probably going to look better. It's like there's all these different paths to take, and everyone finds their own way. And I'm the same as you, Jason. I love hearing stories like yours, Daniel. And it's like the story's not over. Like to me, 2012, it wasn't that long ago. Like, you got a whole career ahead of you too.
Yeah, really. I mean, I'm 40. So there you go.
Wow.
I just barely figured out what I want to do like last year.
Well, and I want to keep an open mind going forward in the future too, because you kind of see how comics operate, and there's definitely a bit of a I don't want to say burnout, but there are people. You see people in the professional comics industry just kind of disappear, and then you're like, oh man, I wonder how they're paying the bills now. So it's something I think about.
Yeah. Well,
so my story's not over.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was talking to assistant. And yes, I said assistant. Don't judge me. I'm not paying him what he's worth.
Or your driver. I was just talking to my driver the other day.
So he helps me flat, and he helps me prepare the comics for Webtoons weekly, and other things, like he's going to help me with these podcasts now. So, and he actually moved here to Pocatello, Idaho, to help me, which is like insane. So
wow,
it's been a real blessing. But I was talking to him just today. I was like, when I was in LA, every like 5 years, I would burn out of whatever career I was in. I was like in storyboards, and I would burn out. Then I went to animation. After a while, I felt like, okay, I get this, and I would burn out. And then I went into Viz Dev and started working in, concept stuff on movies like Kung Fu Panda. And I was like, eventually, I'm going to burn out. And I told my wife that. And she's like, but you can't burn out. This is like the best career ever. I'm like, watch, I'm going to burn out. And sure enough, like 5 years in, I was just like, I got to get out of here. And so I'm like, well, is this inevitable that I'll burn out, like, now that I'm doing my own comics? Like, am I going to burn out on my own comics in like 5 years? And I have enough stories that I could probably, if I worked full time, I could probably fill up, 5 to 10 years worth of stuff. But, I'm like you, Daniel. It's like, I don't know. I might be like, I'm done. Like, peace out. Like I did my time, and let's figure out something else to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because, hey, you only live once, right?
Yeah,
that's right. Daniel, I have a question. How can you break your time into percentages? How much time you spend on Space Mullet, which is obviously your own project, and then how much time you spend on anything else, anybody else's work?
It varies. Since 2012, I've been doing 2 pages a week, no matter what, come hell or high water. And that was in the midst of doing 8-issue series for Dark Horse called The Ghost Fleet. And then I was also doing it while working on a book called Alabaster for Dark Horse this year. And that's been pretty consistent, but as far as like percentages, it's hard, because sometimes if whenever I do monthly comics or comics like for Dark Horse, sometimes I'll have like a string of pages where, just for the luck of the draw, like the pages are not very challenging, so I get those done as fast as possible, and then I'll work on Space Mullet for the rest of the day. But then I might not work on it for another 3 weeks. And then there are some days where it's literally I'm trying to get it out. I'm trying to finish the page the night before or the day before, and I'm staying up late to try and get it done. So right. At the end of this year, starting in October, I had to take a break because I was starting to burn out on Space Mullet, and there just wasn't any time for it. I was having trouble finding that little 10% that I would put in. But I'd say it's very little. I'm more likely to rush a Space Mullet page just for the simple, just not enough time than another. Because like I wake up, I make coffee, I'm like, okay, you get into the mindset of like what's gonna pay my bills,
yeah,
and my brain instantly defaults to the work that it's like I have to get it out of the way first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I feel. And back when I was still just illustrating, when I was doing Space Mullet, I'd do anything. I was doing graphic design. Anything that fell into my lap that was visually related, I would say I could do it and then figure out how to do it later.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, like, some days, there would be literally, like, weeks on end where I wouldn't have any work, and I'd be like, oh, this is great. I'm going to work on Space Mullet. I'm going to get it all done, and then work will come in. And I do that for about 3 days, and then I get depressed. Because Space Mullet in no way at all is paying the bills. So I need that drive. So it's almost like I need something to get me rolling. And then after I feel good about like finishing that, I can go into Space Mullet.
Do you find the same satisfaction doing, the comics that you're assigned to and that you're getting paid for as you do Space Mullet, since they're both comics? Like, for me, it was different because I would go into work and I'd do animation or something. And so it was different enough to where I could compartmentalize them, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. But for me, it was always like way more enjoyable to do the story I wanted to tell versus the stuff I was assigned to do for money.
It's kind of like a double-edged sword. I really love working on Space Mullet and creator-owned projects, but it comes with a weight of like it being your baby and like you want it to be so good. And you're always looking at it. I'm like not going to bed just because I'm looking at a panel that I'm like, should I white out that finger and do it over, or should I leave it be? And I never do that with work for hire stuff. I get it done, I let it go. I mean, if something looks really out of place, I'll change it, I'll fix it, but I never dwell on it. I just do it, and then I go and hang out with my wife or friends or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like I guess it's like would be like any job. Like it's just not as much emotional value put into it. So it's almost easier for me to do.
Yeah.
So like working on Space Mullet. It's like mine, so I feel like I owe more to it, which can get. So in a way, it's easy. It's easier to work on work for hire stuff, and I could see myself defaulting to it. But I know that's not what I was meant to do.
But is it more enjoyable? I guess that's.
It's. I mean, like it. I don't know. It is more enjoyable, I think, overall, and the satisfaction that I get from like creating my own worlds that's something special.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's two different animals.
Yeah, I understand.
It's pretty satisfying to get paid to create artwork for somebody. I mean, no matter what it is and where you're at in your career, there are always those feelings of like, wow, I'm a professional artist. Someone's paying me to create this artwork. They really like my drawings, and they're willing to pay me money for it. That's always kind of satisfying to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But
it's scary too, because you're like, oh man, I better not mess this up.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. They're paying me for this. They're paying me, a lot of money for this. This doesn't look like it's worth that.
Right. Like this foreshortening is so off. I need to fix this.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, can we talk about the future of Space Mullet?
Yeah.
Has that been announced? Probably.
Oh yeah.
It's probably old news.
Actually, they announced it while I was at Rose City Comic Con in Portland, and I didn't know that they were going to announce it. And so then all of a sudden, Twitter is exploding. Like,
that always happens. I just got to say, like, Twitter only explodes when I'm at a convention. Like anything big that's ever happened to Rust has happened while I was at a convention and super busy, and my phone's going crazy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then someone's like, can I buy this? And I'm like, yeah, hold on a second.
Hold on, my real fans online are waiting for me. So, yeah.
But it's coming out with Dark Horse. The first 4 chapters, it's about 200 pages of story, are coming out March 16th. So if anybody is listening, and thank you very much. Anybody listening who might be a fan of Space Mullet, please, if you're not going to buy it, never mind. But if you are, please go to your local comic shop and pre-order it.
When is it coming out?
March 16th.
Oh, that's great. That
awesome.
It's a fantastic looking book. Like I said, I just kind of looked up your stuff this week, and because I live under a rock, and
that's cool. I know what that rock looks like.
Yeah, I think
I think we're all under a rock.
Like. Yeah, I know, yeah.
We're like the hermits, all coming together to complain about things,
but it's a little stressful.
That we don't understand.
Right.
It's a little stressful, Jason, when I'm going to be, talking to you plus somebody else, and I'm like, oh, should I know who this person is? Do I need to? Am I going to look really dumb if I'm like, hey, I haven't seen your stuff before?
Well, I think the real artists live under rocks.
Yeah. Well, I'll go with you on that. Sure.
I'll get lots of hate mail for that. Everyone who's very social online.
Yeah. No, your pages are fantastic. Like,
Thanks,
yeah.
Not just like there's a looseness to them. I can tell that you're working quickly, and I have this belief as an artist that when you work from your gut and you work really fast, something kind of magic happens. Like you make these decisions you wouldn't otherwise make if you had the time to second guess them. And so that kind of dedication to like 2 pages a week is actually a big help, and it shows in a really excellent way in the pages. But also just aesthetically, your book appeals to me. There's lots of comics that I'm not really that interested in because of how they're telling the story visually. But Space Mullet is that's the way I'm always trying to tell stories with Rust. The way that you draw your pages is like, oh yeah, he does that well. Okay, good. That's someone else is trying to do that too. Okay, I just got to make it feel like these pages feel, and then and then I'll be okay with how Rust is.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Those are very kind words. Thank you very much.
And Dark Horse is I think they'd be great to work with. I haven't worked with them at all, but I've talked to people there, and they seem like they'd be a great publisher.
They're great. They're really awesome. And everybody there is. I got to tour the studios in September, and I had an editor that I've worked with. We were walking around the offices, and I'm just kind of this weird guy with this baseball cap walking around who nobody knows. And then somebody, like my editor, would drop, "Oh, here, this is a Space Mullet guy," and they're like, "Oh, you're the Space Mullet guy! You're the Space Mullet!" Everybody's freaking out.
Daniel, do you have a mullet? You got to sport a mullet if you're gonna.
You know, I have long hair now, but I've never had a mullet.
Okay. It's all right. It's all right. I had one when I was little.
That's cool. That was a little before my time. I was
Yeah,
a
you're
90s child, so I was defined by my sweatpants.
yeah you're old enough, Jason.
Yeah, that's right.
Daniel
Yeah.
may not be.
And I grew up in Idaho, so people still here have mullets.
Yeah, right. There's still some mullets there. Yeah.
But
That's
Dark Horse has expressed interest in like a volume 2, and
That's
hopefully if this one sells well, we'll see.
Yeah.
It's so out of my control. I mean, all this sales and
Yeah.
It's really hard because I always encourage people, like, webcomics is the thing. Like, you control whether your stories get out there or not. It's not all about publishing anymore.
Yep.
It still feels really good to hold a book in your hand.
Yeah.
It still
I'm
feels
like-
really good to walk into
Yep.
a comic shop
Ooh, I
or
bet.
a bookstore and be like, yeah, there's my book on the shelf. Wow, that's
I've got some sweats. I want it so bad.
yeah.
Yeah. I love having the books. I mean, I can give a book to like the neighbor lady, and suddenly she's like, "Wow,
you've got a
I'm going to
book."
give this to so and so," and I don't know. It's just like it just changes the whole thing. But if I'm trying to explain to people here in Idaho what I do. They're like, "Why'd you move back here? Where do you work?" And I'm like, "Well, I make comics, and I get paid from a South Korean website." And how do I explain this?
They're trying to call the FBI.
And then I try to, yeah. So
I found that when I tell people, like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I draw comic books." And they're like, "Oh, cool. So what do you like? Is it all you do, or is it like, what do you do for money?"
yeah. Yeah.
They're like suddenly trying to ask, like, "Okay, so what do you really do?"
Yeah, right. They're like, okay, that's what you like to do, but what do you actually get paid to do?
Yeah. People here in Idaho tend to say, like, you do know that comics don't really sell here in Idaho, in Pocatello. Like, you need to find something that really that sells, because there's like the local comic shop is really small.
Because they think that you're like there drawing comics and then dropping them off at the local comic book shop.
And I only sell them to people that I know, that I meet on the street somehow.
Right, and collecting the sales from those and paying, for your groceries.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, when I think of Idaho, I've never been. I think of like just a field of grass with like one dirt road in it, and like you on the side of the road with a stand-up table, like selling your comics, and people drive by.
That's how a lot of Idaho is.
How long have you been there for, Jason?
It's 6 months about now.
Your
It's
life
flying by.
your life like really changed this year. You went from
It's crazy.
Burbank to Idaho.
Yeah. It's really
That is
different.
quite a move.
It's really different. It's been amazing though, and the biggest worry I had was my wife, dragging her from LA. She was born and raised there, bringing her here and saying, "Okay, honey, like hopefully you like it here." And I mean, it's been insane. She just loves it. She loves it like way more than I think I love it. Like she just absolutely loves it, and she makes like friends every 5 seconds. So I'm pretty relieved with that. And so anyway, It's been a real good change, and we have a nice house that's like in the mountains and around trees, and there's deer in the backyard.
That sounds nice.
It's just like it's so un-LA.
Yeah.
And I have a studio that I I rent the studio and I come in and work at it, and it's just so surreal. Everything about it is surreal. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy at this moment. But let's. Sorry, Daniel, I'm going to totally cut you off now.
No,
you can jump back in anytime. Let's jump into Rust. You have Royden. You have 4 Rust books out now, right?
No, I've got 3.
3? What?
Yeah, I know.
I'm so disappointed. No,
there's supposed to be 4.
I could have sworn I saw a 4th book somewhere at a bookstore.
No,
but I guess I was seeing things.
You didn't. No, 3 was released over a year ago now, I think. Well, longer than that. Coming up on 2 years. We might be. Yeah, possibly 2 years ago. I think the 3rd book was released. We are supposed to be announcing this week at some point a Rust book that is coming out in March as well.
Oh, nice.
It's not volume 4, but I'm excited about it. We're basically going to start a second line of the series that's softcover.
Oh, nice.
Because Rust is all hardcover. And so I pitched this idea to Archaea last year at Emerald City Comic-Con. And I was like, what if we, and it was kind of like a off-the-cuff idea. I was like, what if we, because each volume of Rust starts with a 30-page prologue. That's a flashback to the Great Long War that takes place in the story. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what if we took those first 30 pages that I'm telling kind of backwards, like Memento style, through all 4 volumes, and we pull them out of the beginning of every volume and put them in order and release that as its own book and call it the prologues.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And
then they kind of chewed on that and they're like, we really like that idea. And then we would release volume 1 right after that. And it would line up the softcover line of the book. So we would just release, the prologues, and then, or as it's called, I think, Rust the Boy Soldier prologue, and then volume 1 later this year, and then volume 2 next year.
Okay, first of all, before I jump into questions, I gotta say, I love how you're doing Rust. To me, it's so unique for a comic book, and it almost feels like really nice storyboards that are just really well drawn, and it's just really enjoyable to look at. And the whole package, it's the hardcover book.
I know.
My mind is blown. It's one of those books.
Yeah, they're really pretty.
When I went through Archaea's bookshelf at a comic convention years ago, when I first found Rust, it's the one book that really stood out to me out of all theirs, and all their books are beautiful.
They all are.
I mean that, and honestly, Archaea was the company I wanted to publish Remind at when I first started working on it. I was like, they did Mouse Guard, and it's awesome. I want to do it like they did it, And
they offer you something? Weren't you talking with Mark Smiley for a little while?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much we can talk about. But.
It was weird. I mean, it's not weird. I still love everything about them and everyone I've talked to. The thing was, I had a chapter done. I had photocopies. I went to them at a convention and said, hey, can you publish my book? And they're like, well, I can't read any of the words because they're so small. I shrunk them all down to a page. And they're like, well, we just need to see a little bit more. And then I got the job at DreamWorks, and then I started putting it online, and then I got the grant, and then I got the Kickstarter funds, and then I saw them at another convention, and they were like, oh, well, we would like to publish you. And I was like, well, darn it, I already started going this direction. I can't stop it now. But I know I like this direction,
Yeah, it's kind of hard once you've got something in your hand. Because now I'm actually remembering the first time we met was in San Diego. It was not on the DreamWorks campus. I was signing Rust, and you walked by and handed me a copy of Remind.
Ew, that's right.
Do you remember that?
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and you said, hey, I'm a fan of Rust. I just wanted to give this to you. And I was like, oh, to keep. And I was like, wow, this is a hardcover. It's a really nice looking book. I feel like I get handed books often, as I'm sure you guys do. People come by and they'll be like, hey, I just want to drop this off for you. Yeah. And I have a keep it pile. I might want to look at this later. And I don't really want to keep this pile. And I remember, I remember taking your.
I have the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, you get overwhelmed at some of the shows with the stuff people hand you. But I remember picking up your book, and I cracked it as you just turned around and started walking away, like you were just dropping it off. And I cracked it open and just flipped through a couple of pages. And I remember being like, whoa, stop. Like, stop. This is good. Like, this is better than anything else anybody's ever handed to me ever and walked away from. Like, do you need a publisher? And you're like, no, I'm good. But I remember that distinctly because that book really jumped out at me.
Good.
But yeah, that's what sucks, right? You can do photocopies and hand it to somebody, and they're kind of like, meh, this ashcan thing. But then you publish it, and you make a nice presentation, and they're like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what the industry is about too. Like people, it's always hard for me a little bit because I'm so thankful with what Archaea did with Rust, like the packaging on it, the design that they put in it. They have the greatest designers that I get to work with that just make the nicest designs for the book. I don't have anything to do with that. And I get a lot of people that are just like, wow, this feels like a real book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope you still feel like that after you read it. You know, it's like, but the presentation's a big deal. It really helps people want to open it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So was it your decision to go soft cover? Is that an Archaea decision?
No, I would say that I was pressing them on it for a while. Archaea had a rule for a few years when I got in with them that they were going to do hardcover only, which was fine with me at the time, right? Like,
because that's been my strategy. And this is why I'm asking. You know, that's kind of been my strategy is hardcover only. And I'm debating, like, should I do a Remind as a soft cover? I just don't know these things.
Well, for me, it wasn't until Rust was out and on shelves, and I was, you know, peddling it to people. Basically, I'm at conventions and stuff, and I'm selling this book for the cover price, which is $25, and realizing that people are walking into a show with like, you know, maybe $100 to spend, that's a lot of money, and I'm asking for a quarter of their budget of every book they're going to look at, you know, if not more now. Like, I'm like, hey, buy all three, and I sometimes try to offer a deal or something. I'm still looking at, hey, could you spend all of your money right here at my table?
Yeah.
You know, and granted, they can buy it cheaper on Amazon or from, you know, distributors or whatever. But seeing the age of some of my audience that I had, you know, younger kids that were interested in Rust, and it was like, it just looked expensive, you know?
Yeah.
And I had parents that were like, yeah, I'll buy this, but I kind of don't want to give it to my kid because it's really nice. And I don't want them to wreck it.
Yeah.
And so I started, it wasn't till I had, you know, that satisfaction of having the hardcovers on the shelf that I was like, you know, it'd be really nice, Archaea, is if we now did a softcover line that was totally accessible. And I was pushing more on the price than I was of anything. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could, like, you know, get, you know, some softcover versions on the shelf for
$9.99?
$10, $12, like that'd be fantastic. And it took a long time. It wasn't till after Boom and Archaea merged that it started to become actually more of a discussion, because Boom does softcover and they have pretty good market strategy for it, I think. And it made more sense because we were now kind of mimicking the regular book market that will release books first in hardcover and then a little while later release the trade paperback. And it makes sense for Rust right now, and it's helpful for me because I am so behind on volume 4 that it's kind of nice to get something new out at shows this year. And they're actually going to read the first 30 pages of volume 4. That's what's going to be in the next prologues book. But you know, it kind of buys me a little bit of time too. I want to remind people I'm still here. I'm still working. I just, you know, recently had a baby and he's taken up all my time. And
I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it's been 2 years. It wasn't.
What?
He's 2 years old.
You can tell how long I've been out of the loop.
Yeah, we haven't talked in a while, but yeah, you know, my wife and I had a boy 2 years ago. We thought that we weren't able to have children, so he was a big surprise and a blessing. So, awesome. but it was a big surprise, and it really threw me off because I put a lot of extra time into Rust. And I work full time as well. I work in the video game industry here in Seattle. So I'm working, 40 hours a week at a studio in video games, and then I'd come home and work on Rust for a couple hours every day. And so, having a kid started to pinch that time. And then last year, when he was about 1 year old, my wife and I had both separately a bunch of health issues that basically kind of, took us out of the loop for a while. I was down for most of last year and kind of had a hard time getting back on my feet. So, but
I'm glad you're out of it now, kind of.
Yeah. I'm back working again. I got a schedule back again. I had some job stuff too. My job changed last year, and my new job was kind of more stressful and all that. So there was a bunch of changes in my life that kind of put everything on hold.
I see. Well, yeah, that happens when the book is in, third place of all the things you're doing.
I know. Yeah, it's hard to make it really a priority.
Now,
man, I don't even have kids, and Space Mullet goes by the wayside.
yeah.
I know. I had to be really. I mean, early on in my life, I had to be really, really disciplined because my wife didn't even really like me spending a lot of time drawing. She saw it as work, and not to put her down. Over the years, she's become my biggest supporter and encouragement. But when we were first married, she was kind of, when I was drawing, to her, it was like I was working.
Yeah.
And so she was like, "You work all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm drawing for fun. This is what I do for fun,
Yeah.
So then I started to try to take time, she was a nurse, so she'd get up early in the morning. So that's when I would draw. So I would draw really early in the morning while she was at work, and then I would have the evenings free.
That's great.
Yeah. But over the years, when Rust became more of a thing, she was like, "Oh, this is kind of more of a thing."
Yeah.
And then it was a little different. And also just over the time in marriage, she just understood kind of what it was to me as well.
Yeah, I know. She was super supportive of everything you were doing when we met at Emerald City and went out to dinner and stuff. It's like she was just all in. Which, I mean, it's just cool to see someone's wife or husband or just being so supportive. Like it's just neat to see that.
She would let me do a lot of stuff right now if I really asked her. I feel like if we're at a place, if I said to her, I really feel like I want to do this full time, we could talk about it and kind of work out the logistics of it. But that's not something I want to do right now. But she's gone from kind of like, "Oh yeah, this comic book you're drawing," to like, "What do you need? Like, how can I help you?"
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you guys have it a little bit even like different than I do. So, because like when I'm doing comics, I guess like my day job, and then my side thing for fun would be Space Mullet, which is also comics.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like a different animal in some ways. But I admire you guys because when I was working a full-time job, whether teaching or transporting, I wasn't doing barely anything. Like virtually nothing.
Well, to me, that's where Rust came from for me. That's where comics came from for me, is that I went to film school. I got, a certificate of classical animation. I was going to get into animation. I was going to go to LA and work for the major studios. And I ended up kind of jumping into the games industry in Seattle, and then kind of got stuck here because it was a good living. It was like a good wage. But I wouldn't say I burned out, but I quickly became uninterested in the games industry and realized that it was all about, some of it was fun, but a lot of it was about teamwork and working together, and you did this little piece of a big project, and that was boring and unsatisfying. And that's when I started to go home and be like, I need to do something else because I'm not being fulfilled in my job. And so that's when I started drawing comics at home. And so it was kind of out of the non-creative aspect of my job that I felt the need to be creative when I got home. And even last year, I was kind of looking at different jobs. I was looking at a job transition, and some of the jobs I was looking at were concept artists, which I haven't done a whole lot of that before, like full time. And I was scared of it. I thought, what will happen if I'm drawing and painting all day long and then I come home and I have to draw and paint some more, I've never done that before. And that's exactly what you do, right, Daniel? Like you're like working on comics, and then if you got some
Yeah,
spare time, you work on comics.
yeah. Which
Yeah,
gets a little, which I sometimes want to pull my hair out.
yeah.
Well, can I ask, like, is going full time with Rust a possibility for, do you think, in the future and comics?
I'm not sure. I don't think it is. Well, I haven't thought about it in a long time. There was a period of time when I was thinking about it a little bit more seriously. When it was optioned in 2011, when the first book came out, it was optioned by Fox,
Mm-hmm.
and that led to a lot of open doors, and that's why I was, in LA
Yeah.
a little bit more often, and that it was starting to look like maybe not. I couldn't do comics full time, but I could kind of work, for myself a little bit full time. Like I could maybe do more of the freelance stuff, or maybe work for studios, or do storyboards or concept art or pitch shows, or of course the dream of like selling another book or selling a show or something like that.
Yeah.
And then even for a little bit, getting to work for Fox, like consulting on the movie and getting to do some concept art for the movie and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was like, oh man, I might need to quit my job. Like I might actually be forced to make a decision, but that didn't come about. And right now, even if I look at it, I couldn't, I couldn't pay the bills with Rust alone. I don't think if I wanted to, I would have to approach it with a different model. Was probably your model,
You
Jason.
could move here. I have
Yeah.
some studio space.
I know. I would love to share some.
It'd be like
with you.
$100 a month for you. I'm serious. I'll give you half my office.
Yeah, I've thought about that, but I haven't thought about that in a while. Like when I looked at your approach of like, okay, if I want to profit from this as much as possible on my own, I have to do a lot of work, and that's that kind of work that you do, and the book you've written about, like you give a lot of advice about webcomics and making it actually viable, like making it something that will profit people, which I think is fantastic. But that's the approach I would have to take.
Yeah.
I was always kind of like, I just want to get this published.
Yeah.
I like doing this. I'm doing it for fun. I don't care if I get paid. I just want to get it published.
Yeah. See, when I started, I didn't think I could get it published, and that's why I was like, well, I got to do this strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that I was at a certain point that I knew I could self-publish, and then I could figure out like through like a vanity press or something like that, and I could do something initially that would at least get me to sell it and maybe break even. But even then I was like, man, that'll be so much work, and I was kind of lazy, and I'm also a bit of a scaredy cat. I have a hard time. I really like. I have a lot of fear when I think about where my next paycheck's going to come from. And I've noticed there's a lot of artists I work with, and like you guys too, and like people I talk to at conventions, and I'm just like, wow, these guys have guts. They're like, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, and I'm a little bit addicted to my salary job because I don't have to think about it too much. I just can do my job, and then I can kind of come home and work on Rust, and I don't have to think those thoughts too much about like, is this storyline going to sell? Like, are people going to be satisfied? Like, not that everybody thinks that, but I'm afraid I'd get into that mindset myself.
Yeah.
Well, I catch myself doing that, working on new ideas for new projects or something like that. Like, I want to make them marketable because my dad, because Jason, I was seeing what you were doing with your, basically, you were like this one-man band. I mean, you were rocking the Kickstarter thing. You're starting to write a book. You're doing all these awesome things, and I like took a serious look at that when I was doing Space Mullet. And this is before I really started getting like comic book offers, like to do like monthly books with Dark Horse.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad sat me down. He's like, "Hey, like, you should make a 5-year plan." And I'm like, 5-year plan? What's that? I don't know. I can't think this far ahead. He's like, well, this way you'll have a way to measure. You can like kind of guess where you want to be in 5 years, or what your goals are, and then at like 2.5 years you can like reassess and you can see how well you're doing, you have something to measure yourself by. And so I said, like, I want to do my own comics. I want to write my own stories. I want to be able to provide for my family doing that. But then I looked at your model, and I told my dad, I was like, I don't know if I have the ability to do. And I mentioned you by name. I was like, "There's this guy, Jason Brubaker. He does this cool stuff and self-publishing, and he's like really knows what he's talking about." And I was honest with myself. I was like, I really don't know if I have that ability. Like, I would need somebody else who can be like, Dan, you can't do that. That costs money, or blah blah blah. And look at the numbers. And so I had to. I think part of that like plan was me figuring out a way to tell my own stories. While having the backing of somebody like Dark Horse or Image or something like that.
Yeah, you're in a good place, Daniel, because you've got your own book and you're working on other comics. Like, there are these traps I've seen other artists get in. Some like fantastic, some well-known artists, I think anyway, that I won't mention by name, that, you know, I'll talk with in San Diego because I'm sharing a hotel room with them or something like that, and they're like, sure, man, I wish I could work on my own stuff. And they're busy like crazy working for Marvel and working for DC and doing covers and getting paid well too. And then to hear them be like, all I want to do is work on my own book. Yeah. But to do that, they have to essentially stop taking their paycheck and start working for free on their own stuff, or find that time on the side, you know, and that's hard to do. I mean, there are probably guys like me. It's just, you know, a paycheck is nice. You don't have to worry too much.
Like, I can see the draw of that because I haven't had like a regular paycheck since 2012, you know, when I quit my teaching job. And I literally felt like I was stepping into a black hole, and my wife didn't have a job. So we were literally like, okay, we know you can't go back to teaching because our marriage is becoming more and more terrible the longer you're in the job. So that's not an option, you know, but like, so I'm like, okay. And then we made a deal. I was like, if I can cover the rent with art every month, then we're gonna shoot for it. And then however the other bills that come, you know, we'll just take them as they come. But like, I will take care of the rent. And sure enough, like every month, I just squeaked out just enough to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And I'm like we're like in a little tiny 1-bedroom apartment. Rent is not that much. But
see, that's real courage. I don't have that. I'm too scared. I mean, maybe I would have done that when I was in my 20s, or maybe when if this had all happened a little earlier, I might have had the guts or the belief in my ability to do it. But I feel like I'm getting old, and I'm just like, I like, you know, having vacation.
and that's awesome. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing, you know, like, because now that I kind of have regular comic work, I don't have regular paychecks, but I'd get paid, like, I know when I'm going to get paid, at least relatively well. And I'm in the 4 years or 3 years or however many years I've been doing illustration freelance wise, I like, it was my wife Rachel who was like, you got to get out of the job, you got to try the art thing at least once, and if you crash and burn, you figure something else out. But you got to try it once. I'm like, no, we can't do it. How are we going to pay for this? I don't know. And so it really was none of my courage. It was all my wife's courage.
Yeah, having a
because I'm looking back on it, and I'm like,
nice.
the thoughts that you're saying out loud was me actually saying them out loud to my wife, you know, in 2012, like, as we were getting ready to pull the trigger.
See, I like, well, okay, so the full-time job, like when I got on at DreamWorks, I was like, this is great, steady paycheck, and it was at the perfect time in my life because we just had kids, like there was lots of drama in life, so it's like, it was perfect to just have that stability. But I always kept telling myself, you know, once my youngest son is 3, I got to get out of here because I don't need that stability anymore. I can go back into freelance or whatever. Because I was always, what was scary for me is thinking I would become this career DreamWorks artist or something like that. Like, to me, it was golden handcuffs, you know? Like, they pay you well and they give you free food and you have to do everything they say, you know? And so that
Sure.
was the thing that was scary to me. But what I do is I I would get frustrated with the situation, and then I would set things in motion to where it's like once this goes, it's like I gotta follow through with it. Otherwise it's really bad. You know? And that's kind of like what, like, I'm quitting DreamWorks and I'm selling my house and I'm moving to Idaho. It's like, that's kind of that decision.
Yeah, that was, it's so funny, like, to hear you talk about that, because I could, the amount of people out there whose dream is DreamWorks.
Yeah, exactly.
They just want to work at the big studio. And it's so funny because you work at the big studio. I mean, I haven't, but I hear the same thing from a lot of people. It's all those guys from Pixar that go and do their own thing, or they have an artist workshop, or they write a book or draw a book or something like that. Yeah. And Pixar just seems to trump everything. They're like, oh, you work at Pixar? Oh my gosh. And they're like, please read my book. It's like, I want to be known not for my, who I collect my paycheck from, but for this work I do on the side. Yeah.
And there's so many talented, amazing, like, blow your mind artists that are in these big companies, and no one will ever know their work. Yeah. Like, just a very few people will figure out who these different artists are. And to me, that's really sad, because there's so much, all these people have stories they could tell, and they could have amazing different art, but they're doing Shrek,
right,
or something like that. And to me, that's just like, it's frustrating when I see that. Mm-hmm. When people aren't, and what it is for me is it's people aren't given a chance to actually do something that's really amazing.
Well, sometimes very few people are given a chance. You kind of have to take it like you're doing, right? You're just I'm just going to do this.
I guess you're right.
Nobody ever comes
knocks
to
on the door.
Any artist and just says, yeah, hey, how would you like to just work for free for a while?
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally true. I think the people that actually get presented offers of some big, great chance opportunity are the people who have first done something on their own, completely passion type project, and then people see the potential of what they can do if they're in charge.
Yeah.
It seems like that's kind of the pattern.
That's one of the things I think I get the most satisfaction of is when I've heard people say, I heard how you worked on Rust, and that caused me to kind of pick up my pencil at home again and keep working on my project. And that's like, man, that's a good feeling. That somebody that I could say how I forced that situation, how I made the opportunity, and was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to carve out these hours for myself, and they're going to be mine. And I'm going to get this book out, and I'm going to stop watching TV because I want to get this book out. I'm going to stop playing video games because I want to get this book out.
Yeah.
And I tell that to people not to brag, but to be like, you have to realize that you have to make sacrifices if you want to take that opportunity. No one just comes along and says, "Oh, no one's ever handed me that opportunity. You must be lucky." And it's like, yeah, I have a ton of luck involved in this, but it also, the other half of luck is being ready for when the opportunity shows up. I think.
It's like that quote from like an ancient Roman philosopher. I don't know what his name was. Luck is opportunity meets preparedness.
Oh, good. I thought I just read that on Facebook. That feels better that it's like a Greek.
It's like 1800 years old or something.
Yeah, that feels better. I thought it was just a meme that I ripped off somewhere. But it's totally true. I mean, that stuff, no matter where it comes from, that's totally true. You got it. You can't just be like, oh man, this stuff never happens to me. It's like you kind of got to be ready. You got to pretend like it's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
And then even if it doesn't, we live in this age where you can kind of make it happen anyway. Yeah. It may not be the way that you always envisioned it, and you may not be rich and famous, but if you want to share your story with people, this is the best time and place in the world to do it. No one's ever had these opportunities before.
Well, there you have it. That was the first episode of Coffee Table Comics Podcast. I'd like to thank Royden Lepp and Daniel Warren Johnson for coming on the show. There is a part 2 with them, another hour of our conversation that will be released next. I'd like to thank all the guys at makingcomics.com for putting this show on their website. We're also working on an iTunes feed for Coffee Table Comics, the podcast. So look us up and give us a rating, because we're brand new at this again. I did it before, but this is the first time. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Hi, I'm Chris and I come from Townsville, Australia, and I just love listening to Coffee Table Comics.